And I also want to encourage you to never seek advice from someone who is not living by example or exemplifying this type of behaviors that you desire. If you don't respect someone's position in their life, at home, in their relationship, at work, or whatever, you shouldn't be seeking advice from them. You should find somebody else. Good morning and welcome to In the Know with KO. I'm your host, Kristen Adams, also known as KO. And today's episode is extra special to me in my heart. And I'm super excited to share. My wedding anniversary is actually this particular week, November 24th, to be more specific. So I actually just wanted to share a couple of fun stories and also respond to some questions that some of y'all had with regards to how my husband and I survive literally spending almost 24/7 together, because we obviously live together, raising the kids together, we work together, and we even sometimes we play sports together, and we do a lot together. So how do we get through that? But also, we have a lot of fun. And how do you keep things fun? How do you build trust in the very beginning? So there's a lot of fun things I want to share. First, I just want to share something about satellite radio before we get into this. On my way here, I always like to share a little funny moment about the reality of life, on my way here in the car, or what happened this morning. It hit me. I love satellite radio because it allows me to listen to my favorite music and doesn't force me to listen to the trash that's on that's more current. And yeah, maybe it makes me a little old, but I just don't really care. I want to listen to the best of the 80s and the 90s and my favorite freestyle jams and some of the top country hits from the late 90s and early 2000s. Fun fact, I was actually on a line dance team back in the day. So I resonate with some really happy times. And so, yeah, I like to throw it all in. It's quite a mixture, going from freestyle to country. But I realized I love satellite radio because I don't have to listen to anything that is current. And I found a happy place. So looking for a happy place while you're in the car? Hook yourself up with satellite radio. There's my free plug for the day. So I often get asked about my marriage. And again, reason being is we've been married now. This is our 11th anniversary. Got married in November of 2013. And it wasn't perfect in the beginning. We do spend a lot of time together. And I think the reason that it works, we definitely have a lot of fun. But the core to the whole thing is truly respect. And I'm going to explain how that comes to be, okay? So the main way that we found respect in our marriage was by breaking down the walls and barriers of previous situations. We both brought baggage to our marriage, and I don't mean that in children. Our children were not baggage. Our children are blessings. I'm talking about lack of trust or feeling a little jaded, because I don't necessarily believe hurt people hurt people. I believe hurt people are just hurting, and it's difficult to sometimes see things clearly or appreciate the good in someone if you're still feeling that hurt, right? So here's a really great example of how we had to find that respect and build, okay? It's no different than building a structure. If you don't have a good foundation, no matter what you put on top of it, it's going to potentially crumble, right? So when we first started dating, my husband had, we were just dating, and my husband had his cell phone clipped on his side, which if you know him at all, it's pretty much a staple. He actually was wearing it under his tuxedo jacket the day of our wedding. And he had a little Bluetooth headpiece on, and we were at his place, and he put his phone down on the kitchen counter, and he walked away to go to the bathroom. And his phone beeped. So, of course, I looked at it. Yes, okay, I looked at it. And it's not because he gave me a reason. He literally gave me no reason to think that I couldn't trust him. But previous people that I dated gave me reasons that I felt I couldn't trust him. So what did I do? I looked. Yep, I did. And while I was busy looking through his phone, click, 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 I'm snooping around. Guess what he was doing? Listening in his headpiece to every single click. So every time I touched it and scrolled and swiped or whatever I was doing. So he comes out of the bathroom and he's like, did you find what you were looking for? And I'm like, what do you mean? Of course, I denied everything and lied through my teeth. And that's when he started laughing. He was like, you could just ask me. He was like, I truly have nothing to hide. I'm like, oh my gosh, completely mortified. I was absolutely embarrassed. But in that moment, something shifted between us. I had to become vulnerable and face the fact that I did something pretty rotten to him and he didn't deserve that. And on the other hand, he had a very powerful moment himself. He could have shamed me. He could have embarrassed me. He could have been pissed off at me. He wasn't any of those things. He actually did the opposite. He said, you know what? I have nothing to hide. As a matter of fact, this is the password to my phone. And he used to leave it out all the time after that. And if I ever had a question, he was like, here you go. No questions asked. And I immediately disarmed myself. I immediately felt like, oh, you know what? That made me feel so much better. Like there was no great explanation even needed. He acknowledged that I was hurt before, and he kind of took responsibility for the people who hurt me in the past. And maybe part of that was even my fault because maybe I didn't handle those situations very well. I don't know. I probably poured gasoline on the fire, I'm sure, pushed the buttons, did all the things. But part of knowing when to push in a situation is also knowing when to pull back. So I think that as we were building, that was definitely a really key part. For us, another big factor is parenting. And another way that we show each other respect on a daily basis is no matter what it is we're talking about, whether it's how the kids are doing in school, if we have to issue a consequence, if we have to deal with a situation, good or bad, we talk about it first and we kind of like come up with a game plan, and we do that privately. It's never on display for the kids. I can tell you it's very rare that our kids see us fight or argue. And our fights are actually pretty productive. I mean, we don't really have knockdown, drag out fights. Again, we choose to go into them with respect. I'm a firm believer. I don't want to be right. I want to be understood, right? So a lot of the times we're not seeing eye to eye because someone's not understanding. So if you just take a second and you're like, okay, how can I get you to understand how I'm feeling? Both of us then kind of put the wall down and, okay, I would rather hear what you have to say versus I'm right because da 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 da. That never really ends well because it puts the other person on the defense and now they have to, have their say because now they're right about something, and it's kind of like it just never ends, right? So knowing how to manage that has been very helpful for us. I think it's also good for our kids because they are then more apt to receive whatever it is, whether it's praise, consequences, guidance. They are receiving it in a way, realizing both of their parents are on board and we care and we've already established the situation, and they're probably not going to get one over on us because, it's kind of like 2 against 1. Not to make it a competition, but yeah, we do compete a lot. All of us in the house play sports, so we're definitely very competitive. So, it's also important to recognize each other's moments, whether it's good or bad. So, for example, even with me doing this podcast, my husband's been extremely supportive. And no matter what we have going on with a business project, or maybe we're going to change our diet, like whatever it is, we got to support one another. Several years ago when my mom was not doing well and we kind of had an idea that the end was going to be on the horizon, her cancer was taking over. Going to the gym wasn't enough for me. And at that time, we actually had just invested in a martial arts studio. And I jumped in and started doing some privates with our head of the studio, who was a 2nd-degree black belt. He did a lot of studying overseas and he ran a really great program. And I realized, man, I love MMA. Like, it was so much fun. And my husband was so great. He actually would get up and join me at like 7 in the morning before we even started our work day. And he would put the headgear on and the pads, and he would just let me beat the snot out of him for an hour. And it was pretty great. He was a good sport. More than anything, it showed me his appreciation for the work that I was putting in. And it wasn't just building my confidence, it was giving me an outlet, but getting that added layer of support, it really meant a lot. And sometimes I'll show up to the basketball court where he plays with his guys and, you know, just stop by on my way, dropping off the kids or picking them up or whatever. And again, it's a matter of just showing that support. And if you are not even on the same page with your partner, like, oh, I don't even understand what it is they're doing, it doesn't mean you can't show your support. You can still let them know you care. You don't have to necessarily be into it. Like, okay, not everybody's going to want to get on the mats and, punch their spouse in the face or give them a nice kick to the ribs. That was our thing. That I'm not expecting everybody to enjoy that. You know, I don't know who came up with the concept that marriage, or any relationship for that matter, is 50-50, because that means that you're only each giving half. That literally doesn't even make sense to me mathematically. And I guess I'm an overthinker in that regard, but why not be 100-100? Because then if my husband isn't having the best time and he's maybe running at 75, well, you know what that means? I got to be at 125. And there were times where I was definitely not operating at 100%. And he absolutely rose to the occasion. He often does. And that's where you have to have the scale, the balancing, right? You have to figure that out, because you have to recognize that in the other person, and you have to know when to give and when to take. And it's okay. And I've struggled in the beginning of our marriage with asking for help and communicating, but that has become another critical part of the respect that we have for one another. I can't just assume that my husband knows what's going on in my mind. No chance sometimes, right? I'm good at maybe just pushing through and seeming like everything is okay because I'm busy and I'm getting stuff done, and he's just assuming that I'm operating on all four cylinders. Meanwhile, maybe I'm aching inside, or I'm stressed, or I'm frustrated. If I don't communicate that, he can't be sensitive to it. So we each have a role to play where we have to let the other person know by communicating. Communicating is not just saying, okay, this is what the schedule looks like this week, because I do that. I print out an actual schedule for the entire house. Okay, who has what going on, whether it's work, school, sports, appointments, doctor visits, haircuts, the dogs, we have a lot of moving parts in our house. And this is the best way that I have found to communicate that. But again, there's also emotional parts of that. And we even tell the kids, if you don't communicate what's going on, you're stressed about a test at school, or somebody hurt your feelings that, you really thought you guys were best friends and they said something hurtful at lunch. If you don't tell us, we can't help you, right? We're not able to just read your mind. So I think knowing that has given us the ability to not just communicate, but communicate effectively, because it also gives us a chance to respond effectively. And I think that that's actually just as important as the communication factor itself. So I want to tell you another really fun story. People used to always say, oh, Kristen, the things you're looking for in a relationship just don't exist. You're in la la land. That's fairy tales. It's all made up. It's not true. And you know what? That's not the case. I actually believe you find the right person. I found my knight in shining armor. I found someone who didn't just love me for me, but he went out of his way to love me for me, and has absolutely continued to show up in special ways, whether it's a little Post-it note next to a cup of coffee in the kitchen, or a quick message, or just helping to do things. I cooked 2 dinners yesterday. Friends of ours were going through a rough time this week. So I cooked them a dinner, and then I went, dropped it off to their house, came home, and then I cooked us a dinner. So I actually cooked 2 dinners last night, all before 7 p.m. And my husband jumped in and helped with the dishes, that's actually not the norm for him. We usually whoever cooks does the cleaning. I usually do the most of the cooking, and I end up doing the cleaning. The kids kind of help. But the fact that he jumped in and really did that because he appreciated what I did for the other people in our life, That meant a lot to me. And I made sure I recognized that. Somebody stepping in and doing something for you, that's really nice. But you know what makes it even better? Recognizing them and saying, I really appreciate that. So going back to the other funny story I wanted to share, I don't remember exactly which year it was, but the event itself was probably one of the most memorable anniversaries in the history of our marriage and probably will always be. We decided to rent an RV and take the kids on a road trip. And we drove from South Florida through multiple states all the way up to Michigan, where my friend was living at the time. And we wanted to go up for Thanksgiving and spend that holiday with them. And I remember when we first told the kids, we were like, we're going to get an RV and we're going to drive up to Michigan. They were like, why? We can just fly and be there in like 3 hours. I was like, because it's an experience. And you know what? They were secretly super excited about it because they got to basically stay in their pajamas every day, all day. And looking out the window, we saw some of the most beautiful parts of the country that you don't get to see when you're 30,000 feet in the air above the clouds, right? So anyway, that's not why I'm sharing the story. So while on the road, my husband, who historically gets up at like 4 a.m. every day because he's like the most productive human I've ever met and hardest working, he got up and decided to pull up the feet of the RV and close in the sides nice and quietly while we were all still sleeping and get on the road. He figured he's awake, why not? So I kind of heard the movement and I get up and join him. And now by this time it's about 5 a.m. So I get up, I make myself a cup of coffee and I join him. He's the captain, I'm the co-captain. We're both sitting up front. The kids are in the back, still sound asleep. And I know what day it is, and I assume he knows what day it is. And of course, I left South Florida. I had a card and a little gift, and I'm ready to wish him a happy anniversary. But that never came up. You know what did come up? My husband decides, he starts telling me all the reasons he appreciates me, and he's genuinely speaking from the heart. And again, I think he's leading into and happy anniversary. He's going on and on telling me he appreciates this and he loves this and that. And he's just going on and on telling me all of these great things, but never actually said happy anniversary. So finally, the sun comes up and the kids start waking up and we decide, let's get some roadside breakfast and we'll go ahead and top off the gas tank. So we pull over and my husband gets some gas and runs over to, I believe, a McDonald's, which, if you know me at all, is my least favorite food, but it was a necessity. And while he's standing in line at McDonald's, he's got his phone in his hand and he's getting all these text messages from my in-laws. Oh, happy anniversary, love you guys. And he's like, what? And then he thought about it for a second, looks down at his hand because we actually have matching tattoos on our wedding fingers. And he's like, and he looks at his phone. He looks at the tattoo again. He looks at his phone and he was like, oh my gosh. Totally realized he completely spaced out and forgot our anniversary. So he goes and gets me a gas station rose and he comes back onto the RV, tail between his legs, genuinely apologetic and sorry. And I'll admit, I was a little peeved for a hot minute. But then when I thought about it, I realized, hold on a second. You actually spoke from the heart and you said all of those amazing things, not realizing it was our anniversary. Like you were just saying that just to say it, just because you love me? And he says, yeah. I said, okay, I guess I can't really be mad at you anymore. But we did get a nice shopping trip to Tiffany's when we got back from our trip. So I did get a beautiful pair of earrings out of the deal. Which wasn't necessary, but it was definitely fun and we got a good laugh and we still get a good laugh about it because again, it's all how you perceive the situation. I very easily could have just been super pissed off. I could have made him feel like absolute garbage because he should have, right? He forgot our anniversary. But the reality is I realized what a tremendous husband he is and how speaking from the heart like that was greater than any pair of earrings from Tiffany or any place for that matter. So how do you have respect while arguing? Well, that would have been a very, very definitive moment for us to figure that out. How to have respect while arguing? Well, in my opinion, that's pretty easy. One of you has to learn to just shut up. And it's usually me, I will admit, because I have some pretty powerful words. And there's been times where I've said things and I'm just like, man, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Or I wish I wouldn't have said it like that. So I actually have done a much better job of thinking before I speak and not just, you know, having diarrhea of the mouth and letting it all fly out without any thought of what the recourse may be or how it may affect him. I've gotten to the point, and I believe he has as well. I care more about how he feels than being right. And the way that we've figured out how to overcome that is making the time to hear each other out. Again, you have to know when to just shut your mouth and listen. Don't just wait for your turn to talk, because I've been known to do that for many years of my life as an adult. So at some point, you also have to let go of the baggage, right? And appreciate what your spouse has to offer. I don't exactly remember when, I didn't like write it on a calendar, or, there wasn't a true aha moment. I think I just little by little started to feel more peace. And as I started feeling like I could trust more and I felt more appreciated, I was able to give that. When you're hurting, it's a lot harder to give someone the gift of love or trust or respect. Those things go hand in hand. If you're not able to love someone unconditionally, you probably won't be able to communicate effectively, which means you're probably not showing each other respect. And then you're in this vicious circle, and that cycle isn't going to end until the negative parts of it do. So you have to find out exactly what it is that's triggering you, because that's like the buzzword of this generation. Everyone's triggered. But what's bugging you, or what is it that hurt you before? My husband had his share of things that bothered him, and I know now how to be sensitive to those things because I care more about how it makes him feel than pulling one over on him. And, when you have that type of vulnerability between each other, you have the greatest level of transparency. We no longer question anything anymore. I mean, my husband could literally be gone all day and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I hope he's okay. But I'm not questioning, what is he doing? Who is he with? How long has he been gone? Like all the things that used to create stories in my mind that were usually not even true, all of that's gone. So for me, I don't want to win an argument. I want to make sure that we figure it out, overcome it. And for our marriage, the secret sauce is we don't visit it again. When it's over, it's over. Put it to rest, okay? If you have a plant and you try watering it, you try pulling out the weeds, and you try fertilizing it, and you try all the things, and the plant dies, do you keep trying to dump fertilizer on it and water it and put it out in the sun? Or do you just let it die peacefully, dispose of it, and move on? Well, you let it go. And maybe that's not necessarily the best analogy. I was just trying to give some kind of a visual. But for us, man, the best way to get through something is figure it out. And there's been times where, we're going to agree to disagree, but at least we've got it all out there and we'll deal with it, And, the number one rule in our house is if it's funny, you're not in trouble. And sometimes funny has to have a time and it has to have a place. My husband likes to try to make me laugh, which is pretty funny because they always say that women will typically try to marry someone who reminds them of their dad. And my dad was historically known for not saying sorry. And he was also historically known for throwing humor on uncomfortable situations to either help ease his way in or out of it, or to help make the other person feel a little less bad. And my husband's known for doing the exact same thing. If he knows I'm upset about something, he's going to try and make me laugh. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm not in the mood for this, whatever. But it still makes me feel better because I know that that's how much he cares. More than anything, I think it's also important to recognize that husbands and wives each have a role. And I know there are some people listening who are going to be like, Kristen, are you really going there? Yeah, I am. Okay. Because I'm old school. What can I say? I'm kind of an old fashioned girl because I was raised by an old fashioned family in a way. My grandparents, my parents, although they all ended up separating, they had a role to play, meaning You know, the women in my family were nurturers by nature. They did the majority of the cooking, they did the majority of the cleaning, the school drop offs, the pickups, making soup when we're sick, taking us to doctor appointments and haircuts, while the dads or husbands did the majority of the hard work, the travel, taking care of the yard work, things like that. So I was witnessing, these family dynamics, and I've adopted a lot of those same things. I actually take great pride in caring for our home and being the CEO of the house. I am very proud to be, the head of our compound, right? I make sure everything is in proper working order, and I take care of a lot of chores and phone calls, you name it. And I could very easily hire somebody to help with those things, or even hire somebody to pick my kids up from school and do a lot of that running around. But you know what? I like that. It's who I am, and it's my love language. It's my way of loving my family a little extra. And women need love, men need respect. And when I feel loved, I feel respected. And when my husband feels respected, he feels loved. And so by appreciating the role that we each play, and again, I'm not telling you that that's how your marriage should be. This is just me sharing what ours looks like because you guys asked, and I'm giving you the answers. And I'm giving you the answers based on my own experiences, but they're my experiences. They may not work for you. Kind of like when you see an outfit on a mannequin in a store and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the cutest outfit ever. I want that outfit. And then you put it on and you're just like, I'm wearing a sack of potatoes. Or I can't button up these pants. That mannequin is not you. And I've said it once and I'll say it again. You also can't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle. It took us several years to get to the understanding and happiness that we have now. And it took us several months going into a couple years to get that basic level of trust to get us to where we ended up now. So just be careful about window shopping other people's relationships. So today, in closing, to be in the know with KO, don't window shop other people's relationships. There's nothing wrong with seeking advice from someone who you trust. And I also want to encourage you to never seek advice from someone who is not living by example or exemplifying this type of behaviors that you desire. If you don't respect someone's position in their life, at home, in their relationship, at work, or whatever, you shouldn't be seeking advice from them. You should find somebody else. So again, if you have enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave 5 stars. And if you have questions, I highly encourage you to send me a message, particularly on Instagram, and ask the questions or share your own stories. And maybe we can get you on the show. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.